Hello, I'm Bernard Norcott-Mahany. I am your instructor for Classical Mythology, the online edition for fall of 22. Um, just a couple things. This week, well, first of all, welcome to the class. I hope you enjoy, going through some of the myths. I think it's fun to look at stories. I think it's important to look at stories critically, so read them sort of carefully, get a sense of how they work their magic, because I think we live in a world of stories. I think it's pretty much impossible for us to know the world outside of stories. In other words, we're basically hardwired, and I think we're trained to read things in terms of stories. And so that gives the storyteller a certain amount of power as far as presenting the world and how we buy into that. So that's an important thing, I think, about myth in general, not just ancient myths, but also modern myths, because there are modern myths, in America. The myth of the West is a good example. That as long as we had a frontier, right, that we could move further west. This idea of expansion, of course, that led to all sorts of like archetypal images, right? The lone cowboy sort of fighting against the forces of darkness, that sort of thing that you see in a lot of westerns. That really comes out of this idea that we have this great frontier, we can always expand, we can always grow. That's a myth. It doesn't mean it's necessarily false, but it is a myth, right? It is sort of a story we tell ourselves that then affects our behavior. So, welcome again to the class. Throughout this week, you've got the following things to do. You have to read the syllabus, and I sent you a copy of the syllabus. The syllabus has been updated. There were a couple of things in there that apply to the online class that don't apply to you guys, and so I think I corrected those, but if I didn't, then I'll further revise it. But the due dates and everything else, that stuff should be pretty clear. Read that. There's a quiz on that. It says orientation quiz, and take the quiz. You can take that as many times as you want, but that quiz is due by Friday. So you need to get it done by Friday. My suggestion is do it as soon as possible. If you don't do as well as you'd like, and you really can, in this case, retake it, try to get a 20 out of 20. The other thing that you need to do by Friday is you need to introduce yourself to the class on a discussion board. So discussion boards are going to be a big part of the class. So I want you to get used to them. That's part of the reason for the introduction, so that if you have any troubles, we can sort that out before we get into the material. What you're going to do is you're going to introduce yourself in a paragraph. I've already introduced myself on there, so you can read sort of my introduction. That might give you an idea of how you might approach it. But you really can say sort of whatever you'd like regarding yourself for that. So if you're somewhat shy and don't want to give a lot of personal details, you can still talk about something in that introduction. So post that. It should be a paragraph or so in length. Then reply to at least one other student. That will complete that assignment. So you'll get 100%, 20 points for that assignment by doing those two things. Okay, it's fairly straightforward. Your self-introduction shouldn't take you more than about 5 or 10 minutes to do. Everyone is pretty good typists these days, and I think mine, took me like about 2 minutes or so to type. So I think it's easy enough to get it done pretty quickly. So get those two things done. Those are both due on Friday. The regular assignments are going to generally be due on Sundays. I think after Labor Day, I think I've actually postponed the due dates to Monday, so giving you an extra day, or one of the days, maybe it's Thanksgiving. I've postponed the Sunday to Monday, but ordinarily assume that you're going to be doing your assignments as due on Sunday. So the first week's assignment is to read chapter 2 of Classical Mythology by Maurizio. I would advise you either to read chapter 1 or to look at the PowerPoint for chapter 1 that's in the modules for the class. Just to get an idea of what's there. There will be some questions regarding chapter 1 on the test, the first test. So being familiar with that. This is the textbook, the main textbook for the class, Classical Mythology in Context by Lisa Maurizio. You're going to read chapter 2. Now, what if you don't have a book? If you don't have a book, I've got the main thing from chapter 2. Well, first of all, I've got a PowerPoint on chapter 2 that you can look at. There's a video PowerPoint that is, there's a link to that in the links, in the announcements. If you look, you'll see links to video lectures. The sound in it is weird. It sort of goes on and off a little bit. So there will be some points where it's like, you're not sure exactly what I said, but I think for the most part, you'll get the point. I don't know what was going on with that particular program. But it'll give you the main points. So there's that. There's also the entire Theogony by Hesiod, which is the first classical work that we're going to look at. This tells the story of the creation and then of the rise of Zeus. Right? The main story of it is really the rise of Zeus, but of course we have to start with the creation because that presents Uranus, his grandfather, and Cronus, his father, and then finally Zeus comes to power, and then of course his power, according to Hesiod, is everlasting, and so therefore he won't be overthrown like his two predecessors were. So if you don't have the book, you still have access to Hesiod's Theogony. Again, in the modules, you'll see it, and I've got a commentary. So in other words, what I did is I copied the text. In this particular case, it's the same text that's in Maurizio, the translation by a guy named West, and I've got the West text. But as I went through it, I put it in Word. I actually put footnotes for anything I wanted to comment on. So that might help actually you get a sense of like what's going on here. Those footnotes will actually give you some insight as to what's going on there. So if you don't have the book, you can still get the assignment done. Now, the discussion board, which is the only assignment for this week other than the 2 introductory assignments I mentioned, the discussion board, it says for chapter 2, but it could be chapter 1 and chapter 2. You need to make 5 total posts. It's worth 15 points. You basically get 3 points per post. I want you to make 3 separate posts by yourself. So in other words, read, make a post, read, make a post, read, make a post. Something like that is my advice to you. And for the people who say, well, I don't have time to do this, I would say each day, try to give some time to your mythology work. If it's half an hour, great. If it's a little more than half an hour, great. If it's 15 minutes, that'll pass, but at least get something done every day. I am a person who does not believe in the value of cramming anything. Can you get through the material in a single day? Absolutely, you can. How much of it will you remember? About 5%. You will remember very little. If you do it in bits and review the bits that you do, like if you take notes, you can review the notes, you're going to have a much better sense of what's going on. You'll have a much better sense when it comes to the test. You'll be better off. In addition, this is a way to ease into getting the work done. So in other words, read for 15 minutes to a half hour to 45 minutes, something like that, and stop. Whatever you've read, make a post on that, comment on that. Next day, do the same thing. Make a post on that. Next day, do it again. And then you've got your 3 posts. Then the only thing you need to do is reply to 2 fellow students, for which you don't actually have to really reread the text. And you've got the assignment done. Now, you still want to make sure you read all of Hesiod's Theogony, and that will take some doing. It's not a long work. It's about 30 pages in a paperback. It'll be about 30 pages, but there's a lot of stuff in there that, of course, would be unfamiliar to you, and so that will take some time. It will not be an easy read. But 15 minutes can still get you a page or two of the text read, and then you can comment on those 2 pages. That's my advice. If you do steady work in the class, you'll get the discussion stuff done, and for that you can get 100%. That's going to help your grade. I think it's also going to help your understanding. But there are 2 tracks here. You want to learn something, right? If you're in the class, you don't want to waste your time. You want to learn something, but you also want to get a grade, and being able to put one big chunk of the class's points where you can get 100% of that is going to help you a lot. If you really bomb in some other area, that's going to be able to pull you up, so you don't flunk the class. So that's my recommendation. Some people I know wait till the last minute. I think it's a mistake, but you're adults. You can make your own choices. So to recap, 3 things you need to do this week. By Friday, you need to read the syllabus and take the orientation quiz on the syllabus. You may retake that if you get a score less than 20 out of 20 to try to get that at least up into the A range, which would be 18, 19, or 20. I would advise if you get anything below 18, definitely retake it to try to just help. If you take it and you get only 50%, you've still taken it. You've got some points on the board, but that I would still suggest that you retake the quiz and improve that score. You also need to introduce yourself. Here you need to make 2 posts total, a post about yourself and then a reply to a fellow student. And when you do the reply, you want to make sure you comment on something that person said. So the person might talk about I've come to Kansas from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Blah, 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 blah. And if you, say, had ever been to the Upper Peninsula, the UP of Michigan, you can then maybe talk about that. I went to such and such, and this was very beautiful, blah, 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 blah. So, in other words, don't just say, glad to see you, glad you're in the class, or something like that. Expand on it a little bit. That's all you need to do for those 2. Those who are due on Friday, get those done. You also need to get those done or the first discussion board, which is on chapter 2, but it's really chapter 1 and chapter 2. So if you look at the video of the PowerPoint for chapter 1, you can then comment on what was in that video, and that would be 1 post. You want to get 5 posts total, 3 posts of your own, and then 2 posts in reply. Do not do 3 posts in one. If you've got 3 things to say, make them as 3 separate posts. This makes it a lot easier to comment on it, because if you make 1 point, whoever replies can comment on that 1 point. If you make 3 points in 1 post, they're not going to actually apply to all your stuff. They're going to find 1 thing in there. That's not really an efficient way to do a discussion on a bulletin board situation. So 5 separate posts. That will get you 20 points. That will get you 15 points, excuse me. And you want to get 15 points for each discussion. Actually, if you get some of the discussions in early, you can get up to 2 extra credit points as well. So that can really help also lift that score, which on the score side of the track that's your score, getting good points on the discussion boards can help lift your overall score. Right? There's nothing wrong in that. Part of going to school is the grade game. And so winning the grade game is great. Learning something is more important, but, employers and everything else, they're going to look at your grades as well. So doing well there is a good idea. So 3 things. Orientation quiz, introduction, bulletin board, and then the discussion board on chapter 2, which is really chapters 1 and 2. Welcome again to the class. I may post other videos, but generally this is sort of the one time you really get to see me. So this is what I look like, and I think mythology is fascinating. I think stories are fascinating. I think stories really determine how we look at the world, In other words, we don't look at it's almost impossible for us to look at the world outside of some story narrative, whatever that is. And so it's important to learn how to be critical about stories, how to read them critically. So that's what my goal sort of in the class is, and I hope that you have a good time with the class, and I look forward to your discussion posts. I will reply to a lot of discussion posts. I try to reply to every student at least who's posted up until about Friday, and then the weekends are a little bit dicey. I don't always answer as much stuff on the weekends. So good luck. Hope you enjoyed the class, and see you online.